Hey, welcome to lesson 3.1. If you're watching that, that means you already passed level 2, and that means you are crushing it in geometry. Congratulations, I'm very proud of you. But enough with the small talk. Let's talk about triangles, which is what the focus of this unit is going to be about. Now, there are three different kinds of triangles. All right. Now, all triangles have three sides. That we know. But there's three different kinds. The first kind is called a scalene, and a scalene has three different angles and three different sides. Okay, all the sides and all the angles are all different. All right, nothing is congruent to each other. So we would say that there's no congruent sides and no congruent angles. So each angle is a different measure and each side has a different length. The second one's called isosceles. And now isosceles, if you're looking at this, has two congruent sides. All right, and we're going to use our congruent mark. Remember that from Unit 1. And two congruent angles. All right. So we're going to write that here. There's two congruent sides and two congruent angles. And it's not either or, it has both of these. It will always have two congruent sides and two congruent angles. The final one is an equilateral triangle, and that's where all three sides are the same and all three angles are the same. All right, that's why it's called an equilateral. Lateral means side. Sorry, my cat's running around everywhere. Lateral means side and equal means equal. So this has three congruent sides and three congruent angles. Now I'm not going to say this again, but each angle in an equilateral triangle is always 60 degrees. Okay, always. Just putting that out there. It's always 60 degrees. They're always the same and it's always 60 in equilateral. Now, an interesting fact about triangles is that the sum of the interior angles, so that's the angles on the inside, interior means inside, these angles on the inside, are always add up to 180 degrees. All right, every triangle, doesn't matter if it's scalene, isosceles, or equilateral, they will always add up to 180. So in each one of these triangles, angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3, if I add up these three angles, no matter what I'm looking at, they will always add up to 180 degrees. And we're going to be using this fact today to solve some interesting problems. And by interesting, I mean interesting. All right, so let's take a look at scalene triangles first. In these two examples, we're going to find the missing angle in each scalene triangle. So both of these are scalene, meaning all three angles are different. We're going to find the missing angle. And the way to do that is pretty straightforward. The way we do that is we just subtract the two angles from 180. So the whole thing has 180 degrees in it. All you do is subtract the two given angles. So in this case, we're going to subtract 70 and 72 from 180. Okay? So we just subtract the two given angles from 180. When you do that, you should get 180 minus 70 minus 72 is 38 degrees. All right? And so our missing angle is 38. So if you added these three angles up, guess what you would get? 180. Always 180. They always has to add up to 180. Why did I write that? No, it's 38 degrees. What are you doing? Okay. So let's try that one more time. So if you have two missing angles, if you want to find the third, if you have two angles given and you want to find the missing angle, in this case it's angle A, we just take 180 and we subtract the two given angles from it. You can use a calculator, however you feel comfortable with it. So this is 180 minus 43 minus 38. That is 99 degrees. All right. When we do that, we get 99 degrees. So our missing angle is 99 degrees. And sure enough, if you add up these angles, they would add up to 180. So let's put that in, 99 degrees. And take a minute to check my math, because I did do that in my head. But both of these angles, if you add them up, should add up to 180. All right, moving along. Now we're going to talk about isosceles triangles, all right? And we're going to start off with the isosceles triangle theorem. And that is, if two sides are congruent to the triangle, so if two of the sides are congruent, then there must be two congruent angles. All right, so if I know there's two congruent sides, then I know there's two congruent angles. So if we look at this triangle right here, if I know that ED is congruent to DF, then I know that there is also two congruent angles here. All right, and I'll tell you how to find the two congruent angles. You need a highlighter. So if you need a highlighter marker, go find a highlighter marker before continuing. Pause the video, find a highlighter marker. I'll show you how to do it. All right. So how are you going to figure out which two are congruent? What you do is this. You highlight the two congruent sides. So these two sides are congruent. Let's highlight them. You should be doing the same thing. Oh, that was ugly. Do the same thing on your triangle. So highlight the two congruent sides. All right? Now the other side, use a different color and highlight the bottom. That bottom is called our base. And the base is what has the two congruent sides. All right? So now that I have that figured out, my base is where the two congruent sides are, here and here. They are on the base. All right? So I know angle E is congruent to angle F. All right? Two congruent sides, there must be two congruent angles. That's always the base. Let's write that in here. The base always has congruent angles. Okay? And we know this because congruent sides are always opposite congruent angles. All right? Another way to do that is to draw an arrow. All right? So you can draw arrows from the congruent side. So I start at the side, I draw it across, I draw it across. I like the highlighter method. So let's see if we can do this in action. All right? In triangle ABC, we know that AB is congruent to AC. So remember, you have to mark things that are congruent. Get good at this. So if I know AB is congruent to AC, let's mark that. First thing you always do with problems, AB and AC. Okay? Mark them. Which angles are congruent in the triangle? So we're trying to find the angles now that are congruent. Well, what I'm going to do is take out my highlighter, as you should be doing. Let's highlight our two congruent sides. Nope, wrong color. Highlight, highlight. Let's make that base a different color. And so this must be our base. So I highlighted the two congruent sides, and that's my base. So where are my congruent angles? Let's just mark those up now. Let's just mark it up. It'd be this angle and this angle. So we know angle B is congruent to angle C. And just to remind you, maybe we didn't talk about this, but when you use these marks, that means the angles are congruent. So a mark like that means that the angles are congruent, just like how these show that the sides are congruent. Okay, if I had two, then I have to have two here. So that means when you have the same amount of marks, that means they are congruent. All right, in triangle XYZ, we know XY is congruent to ZY. Which angles are congruent in the triangle? Well, let's try it again. Let's just highlight it up. Let's highlight it up. Highlight our, wrong color. Highlight our congruent sides. So this side and this side, okay? And we're gonna, that means this is our base. And so now we just mark our congruent angles. Bing and bang. Those marks show me that they're congruent, and so we know that angle X is congruent to angle Z. All right, we're doing awesome. Highlighter helps, guys. Trust me, I've been doing this a while. You just got to trust me. So in this triangle, we're going to find all the missing angles. All right, and as you can see, that there's two congruent sides, so this must be an isosceles triangle. So we're going to find the missing angles, and we know this in isosceles. You best believe you're going to take out a highlighter and start highlighting. Damn it, wrong color again. That keeps happening. You start highlighting like so. We highlight our two congruent sides, and then we put our congruent angle in. Okay, now pay attention. Pay attention carefully because it's about to go down. So we're going to mark our two congruent angles. We know this angle and this angle are congruent. F is congruent to E. And that means if E is 65 degrees, guess what F has to be? 65 degrees, right? Because they are congruent. The base angles are always congruent. So how do we find our missing angle? We just do what we did before. 180 minus our two given angles. You always need two to do this. And you get 180 minus 65 is 65, 50 degrees. Take a minute, add up these, make sure I did the math right. Maybe I did. If I got it wrong, don't come yelling at me like, Mr. Siegel, you're wrong, you're so stupid. I get it. My mental math sometimes messes up, okay? But I think I did it well this time. For our final example, in the figure below, which is a triangle, we know CA is congruent to AT. So that tells us that it's an isosceles triangle because there's two congruent sides. This is key information. Whenever you're reading a problem and they tell you that two sides are congruent in a triangle, you know it's isosceles. If you know it's isosceles, you probably got to take out your highlighter. So, got the color right this time. We're going to highlight our congruent sides. I forgot a step. Remember to mark these. CA is congruent to AT. Okay. Now let's make our base. All right, our base is right here. So now we just mark these. We know that C is congruent to T. Well, now we're kind of stuck, right? Because if I know one of them, then I know they're congruent. So if I knew that C was 50, then I know that this one's 50. But I only know that this one is 80. But I can't put 80 here. This is the number one mistake I see. Someone will go like, oh, this is 80. No, it's not 80. You know why? Because only the base angles are congruent. So what you need to do here, if you don't know either of the base angles, I'm going to write that down. If you don't know either base angle, pay attention to what you do. All right, we're going to take 180 and we're going to subtract the 80 this time. Okay, when we do that, we get 100. Now, it doesn't mean that both these angles are 100. That would be silly, because if you add this up, 100 plus 100 is 200 plus 80 is 280. That's not how this works. What you have to do is take that 100 and just divide it into 2. So it's 100, and since there's two congruent angles, we're going to divide it evenly by 2, and that gives us 50. So this is 50, and this is 50 degrees. All right? And so there you go. That is how this isosceles triangle got solved. So 50 plus 50 plus 80 is 180. Hopefully I did that correct. All right, if you're using your highlighter right, this lesson should go A-OK. And I found out an interesting fact that I'm going to drop some knowledge on you guys right now. Did you know that fruit flies, the ones that are like flying over your old fruit, I always like, where'd those come from? Well, they're actually, their eggs are on the fruit and they hatch. And that's why there's always fruit flies around your fruits, because they actually live on the fruit. I didn't know that. Someone told me that today. It blew my mind. All right, peace, guys. Be good and don't punch an old person.